New York City mayoral candidate Andrew Yang found himself in the middle of a progressive firestorm after he voiced support for the Israeli airstrikes in Gaza. Now, Israel's military had begun conducting airstrikes on Monday after Hamas fired rockets into Jerusalem, killing at least 2 people. Now, Hamas fired those rockets in retaliation after Israeli security forces had cracked down. We've seen the videos, of course, of heavily armed police from Israel inside Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site. And so what you constantly have is retaliation for this, retaliation for that, retaliation for this, retaliation for that. And it's a never-ending cycle. Okay. Now, the East Jerusalem neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah, where Israel's right-wing government is also seeking to forcibly evict Palestinians to make way for Jewish settlers as part of land seizures that have been considered illegal by the United Nations. And so this is what we have. You have people dying. You have land getting seized. You have people being denied civil human rights, mostly Palestinian, by the way. And so this is just the latest example of this never-ending horrible cycle. And so far, you had 30 people, at least 30 people that have been killed. The majority of them have been Palestinian. There's Israeli victims as well, 2 of them so far. A 50-year-old Israeli woman and an 80-year-old woman, as well as her Indian caretaker, have been killed as well. On the Palestinian side, there's been reports of at least 9 children that have been killed in these strikes. And so we have a situation where there's no winning here. There's no winning. So on one side, you've got the well-funded right-wing military of Israel, funded partly by, you guessed it, the United States, with all the advantages that brings. And then, of course, on the other side, you've got some jihadis with rocket launchers, douchebags. And so there's not, in my opinion, not a lot of good guys. You have a lot of good guys on either side. And again, on the one side, you've got Hamas, it's a terrible terrorist organization. And then you've got Israel on the other side, that's an apartheid state run by a corrupt right-winger who regularly violates international law and does illegal settlements on Palestinian land. Also, yes, ethnic cleansing that's going on as well. So, and in the middle of those two, you have innocent people that are being killed. Innocent civilians that are dying, and it continues to be fueled, or it continues to fuel the violence on both sides. And I'm not saying that it's a both sides issue. I want to avoid doing that because I don't think it's a both sides issue, because both sides are not equal in this. And this is where it gets to where, the media calls, the Palestinians are clashing with the Israelis. No, there's a huge power imbalance going on here between, again, the mostly unarmed civilians of Palestine, minus the people with, rockets and stuff, versus an incredibly powerful modern military force bankrupt by the most powerful countries in the world. And so there is a massive, massive imbalance that's going on here. And so that said, Andrew Yang stepped in it. Okay? And so here's what he tweeted. I'm standing with the people of Israel who are coming under bombardment attacks and condemn the Hamas terrorists. The people of NYC will always stand with our brothers and sisters in Israel who face down terrorism and persevere. That statement's pretty tone deaf. And after a lot of criticism, as well as praise from people like Stephen Miller and Ted Cruz, he backtracked. He said that his volunteers, quote, felt that my tweet was overly simplistic in my treatment of a conflict that has a long and complex history full of tragedies, and they felt it failed to acknowledge the pain and suffering on both sides. They were, of course, correct. I mourn for every Palestinian life taken before its time, as I do for every Israeli. Support of a people does not make one blind to the pain and suffering of others. Now, of course, the damage is already done. He already stuck his foot into his mouth once again. In fact, as a result, a Muslim community in Queens disinvited Yang from a Ramadan event. And of course, you had AOC going after him on Twitter, as well as other politicians, Here's what she said. Utterly shameful for Yang to try to show up to an Eid event after sending out a chest-thumping statement in support for a strike that killed 9 children, but then try to do that in Astoria during Ramadan. They will let you know. And guess what? They let him know.
So now, what do you have to say about your tweet directly to New Yorkers right now?
It's heartbreaking. All of this is happening. It's heartbreaking, right? It is. You know, people are dying. Civilians are dying. Do you condemn Israel for that? Do you condemn Israel for their unjust acts against the innocent Palestinians? Sir, I'm talking to him.
We got the publicist over here. We got the guys over here.
We gotta go.
Don't say anything that's gonna fuck up your campaign. And that's why you don't have my vote, and I guarantee you, you don't have the vote of a lot of New Yorkers.
Sir.
Based. That was great. I love it. So she's right. Now, here's the thing. What's going on is kind of complicated. It's incredibly messy. It's been going on for a very long time. And again, the whole point is innocent people are dying. The Israeli military is absolutely doing war crimes. They're doing ethnic cleansing. They're doing it, by the way, with American tax money. Palestinians are living in an open-air prison right now. And as a result of these horrible conditions and the lack of human rights, yes, there are people that turn to Hamas. Hamas then will go and do terror attacks. And then they say, oh, we want to wipe Israel off the map, which, again, saying shit like that doesn't actually help your cause. It doesn't help for peace. But at the same time, Israel and the United States are preventing a peaceful option from actually happening. And so right now, and this is why it's frustrating to do these stories. Nobody seems to want to get out of this perpetual cycle of violence. They're stuck. We're stuck. We're stuck in it. How long have we been talking about Israeli and Palestinian violence? My entire life, we have been talking about this, and nobody wants to do the things that will actually work, to get actual peace in the region. Okay, and that's the sad part. I do think that Israelis, the citizens, deserve safety and security. Palestinians also deserve human rights and safety and security and the ability to flourish. None of that should be mutually exclusive. And I don't see anybody really talking about that. I mean, you do got some politicians, Ilhan Omar, Bernie Sanders, AOC, a few others. That's about it. But until that happens, until Palestinians actually get human rights and a place of their own, and the ability to live good lives, and have Israel stop stealing their land and oppressing the population, Hamas is always going to have an excuse to do violence and get new recruits, and then Israel's always going to have an excuse to go and launch airstrikes, and the cycle of death continues over and over and over again. That's what sucks about this. It's never going to end. On the current trajectory, it's never going to end. It's got to stop. And I don't know, where you start on that. But maybe you ought to try, I don't know, treating Palestinians as human beings and letting them be equal in your society. It's a starting point, at least. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.